Hey everybody, so let's talk some waivers, waiver acquisitions, waiver targets for week 6 of the NFL season. And what I'm doing, I'm breaking these into positions, and I give you 3 of each position, and I give you 3 to start this week if you need some relief, if you have somebody on waivers or some injuries to fill in for, and then I also give you 3 additional ones for longer term. So if you just have, if you're needing a position or you need an answer and you need to take some flyers on some guys, I have longer term ones as well. So let's just start with quarterback. Oh, by the way, for defense, I am only doing the streaming defense. And also, before I get going, if you're stumbling upon this for the first time, I put together my own daily fantasy analytics. It's what drives my book, The Fantasy Football Almanac and Draft Guide, before the season. It continuously gets smarter as I feed data into the system. Earnings season is basically week 4 through week 16. I'm feeling really good about my projections. I had a great week last week, and it should get better from here. It has for the last 5 years. That's how it's tracked, statistically speaking, for the last 5 years. So, again, let's get started here. Quarterback, Gardner Minshew, still only owned in 17% of the leagues. He is the 11th rated quarterback in my league. I think he's going to have a nice game this weekend. I like who he's playing. New Orleans, I think that New Orleans is going to shut down the run. I think Gardner's going to have to throw the ball. Chark, even though I think he's going to have tougher sledding in the coverage is there, I do think he will be able to move the ball. I think D.D. Westbrook could also get a touchdown. I like Gardner Minshew. Colt McCoy this week. Yes, I know Washington is a dumpster. I used to own Washington Redskins season tickets, and then Dan Snyder stole my joy as a Redskins fan. So now I'm left just kind of watching this whole horrible thing unfold. But Jay Gruden's gone. We don't know how Callahan is going to call plays. I would think that he would want to run the ball a little bit more, but I think Colt McCoy is worth the pickup because he's playing Miami, and I think there will be opportunities. Teddy Bridgewater also, I don't love his projection this week, but again, he'd probably be my number 3 out of 3 in this one, but he's playing well. Jacksonville gave up some points and some yardage to Carolina. I think it's a tough defense. No disrespect for Jacksonville's defense at all, but if I'm looking at the waiver wire, guys that are going to be out there, he's the best of the rest there. Long-term plays, if you're looking for quarterback, I'm going to give you 3 to put on your roster, and they should be available for you. First is Gardner Minshew. Guys, he's going to be the starter out there, guys and gals, right? He's going to be the starter out there. It's inertia. I mean, he works all areas of the field. I think he is today already better than Nick Foles, not to mention his growth path going forward. It's a no-brainer. I don't know if Jacksonville will do it. Who knows? But I would say that my strong suspicion is that Minshew is going to be the full-time starter, and Nick Foles, once again, will be the backup. Daniel Jones is on my list, only owned in 55% of the league still. I don't like him this week against New England at all, but a long-term play, I think he's somebody you got to stash, especially with Golden Tate back. Once Tate and gets up to speed, NFL game shape, and Evan Ingram is healthy, and Saquon Barkley's back, this is going to be a nice offense going forward. And then lastly, Kyle Allen. I think he could be the long-term quarterback, and we don't know. Liz Frank injuries are so weird, so Cam Newton could be sidelined for the whole year. We don't know. It would not shock me if he gets on the IR at some point. Kyle Allen could be a nice start. Now, he's more of a dink and dunk type quarterback. He's more Kyle Allen to me than he is Gardner Minshew. But if you need a quarterback, you're throwing screen passes to Christian McCaffrey. That can't be all bad. Now, let's move it on to running backs. There's not a lot out there, frankly. I'll just say this. Saquon Barkley is questionable. My suspicion is he won't play. Wayne Gallman with a concussion, I believe, is questionable. If he doesn't play, you have John Hillman. I don't like the matchup against New England, but if you have a primary running back out there on waivers, he is the 3rd ranked running back on my list. He's only owned in 1% of the league, so he's going to be there for you most likely. Next guy on my list is Chase Edmonds. Actually, he is the top guy on my list if David Johnson doesn't play. I think there's a lot of opportunity against that Atlanta defense. I think Chase Edmonds will find the end zone if he is the primary ball handler for the Cardinals. We'll see what happens to DJ. If he doesn't play, snap up Chase Edmonds. I think he's going to be a nice start this week for whoever gets him. Lastly, I'm going to stick with that Miami-Washington game, which will prevail throughout this whole episode. Chris Thompson, he will have some opportunities. He was the top reception targeted guy in Washington last week against the Patriots. I think that Miami is going to give up some screen yardage. My only hesitation is I don't know if Callahan is going to utilize him in the screen game. I don't know what the snap count distribution is going to be between he and Adrian Peterson, so he carries some risk. If this were Jay Gruden called game, I would love Chris Thompson. As it stands, who knows? But I like him more than anybody else you're going to find on waivers this week. Long-term play. So you're looking for a flyer for somebody that could be good. I think Miami is underrated. So I'm going to say Belage out there. He's the more of the receiving back. I would say he's more of the James White type of back than he is the Sony Michel type of back in this scheme that is based on the Patriots scheme. I don't love him. Only owned in 11% of the leagues. But again, if you're taking flyers on guys, there's one. Rex Burkhead, I do like. Here's the thing. I actually started the Fantasy Football Almanac in my daily fantasy analytics specifically to find out what the hell the Patriots were going to do with their running backs week to week. And after, a lot of years and years of working, we kind of finally landed on it. And what I noticed in the research is that Rex Burkhead, when Gronkowski was out of the game in previous seasons, Burkhead would typically be used as an H-back, and he would get a lot of those targets that would usually go to Gronkowski. So with Gronkowski out, Lacoste hasn't really exactly asserted himself as a pass-receiving tight end. I like Burkhead to play H-back, and so he's going to get catches. Now, I don't like him as much as I like Sony Michel and James White, but again, you're looking for somebody that you can invest in for the long haul. I like Rex Burkhead. 34% of the league's owned. There's not really a lot out there on the waiver wire. He's worth a flyer. Lastly, and he's actually, I should say last but not least, Alexander Mattison. I've been talking about him since before the season. He's one Dalvin Cook injury, and Dalvin Cook is injury prone. He's a Dalvin Cook injury away from being a fantasy football star. He's not as good as Dalvin Cook. There aren't a lot of people who are, but if he gets in there, he's an improvement over what Latavius Murray was last year for Minnesota. He has a lot of talent. He has a lot of burst. He can be used in the screen or the run game. He will be a bell cow running back just like Dalvin Cook is for Minnesota. So he's a guy, he's a perfect handcuff. If you own Dalvin Cook, just pick up at Madison now, especially if you have some roster space. He's a great handcuff. Once again, only owned in 16% of the leagues. All right, let's move it on to wide receiver. First one on my list here is Auden Tate for Cincinnati. I mentioned him. He was on my list last week, and he got in the end zone, by the way. What I like about Auden Tate is that the Cincinnati Bengals, with Tyler Boyd being as good as he is and is starting to ascend and all that, while A.J. Green is still out, that second receiver is going to get to see a lot of one-on-one matchups, and Andy Dalton is a talented enough quarterback to get him the ball. Auden Tate, I think, could get in the end zone this week. He's a nice start and play. He's a great daily fantasy sleeper play, a budget player. I think you can snap him up against a Baltimore defense that gives up yardage in the passing game. I think Baltimore is going to limit Joe Mixon, make this team one-dimensional, and it's a dimension that Cincinnati can exploit against Baltimore. I think Auden Tate has himself a nice game. Next one on my list is Marquise Goodwin, who I've been a little bit down on this year for San Francisco. I do think the Rams will be able to bottle up. Well, I shouldn't say bottle up. I think they'll slow down the San Francisco running game. I do think Garoppolo is going to have to throw the ball more. I like Kittle this week. Obviously, he's not going to be on your waivers. I like Deebo Samuel more. You might be able to get him, although he's on too many rosters at this point for me to include him in the segment. Marquise Goodwin only owned in 4% of the leagues. He's a guy that you can pick up and start. He's not my favorite, but if you're rotating a bunch of guys through daily fantasy, I'd put him in my rotation, and I like him. The last one is just kind of the poo-poo platter of receivers from the Washington Redskins Miami Dolphins game, all owned in less than 10% of the leagues. You have Paul Richardson for Washington, you have Devonta Parker for Miami, and you have Preston Williams. For my money, I would take Preston Williams. I think Devonta Parker, assuming Norris plays, is going to kind of be locked up and limited. I think Preston Williams will have a ton of opportunities. I think he'll find the end zone this week. Daily fantasy sleeper, absolutely. Paul Richardson, I think he'll have opportunities, but again, it's that Callahan calling. I think he comes with some risk. Over onto the long-term wide receiver plays. I'm with Parker and Williams from Miami. I think Josh Rosen. I don't think Miami is as bad as they are made out to be. They've had some opportunities. They play teams pretty tough through the first 2 or 3 quarters. And Josh Rosen is actually throwing some nice balls that have been dropped by Parker and by Preston Williams. I like both of these guys. Both of them are owned in less than 7% of the leagues out there in fantasy land. I like Williams just a little bit more because he's taller, and we have more of a book of knowledge on Parker. He's up and down, but I like both of these guys as a flyer. Next guy on my list is Jamison Crowder. Remember, in the first week of the season, he had huge week, and then Sam Darnold got the kissing disease. I don't know what cups he was drinking of. I don't know whose faces he was licking, but he was out with mono. Well, Sam Darnold's back. Don't forget about Jamison Crowder. He's a long-term play. You could even squeeze him in against Dallas this week if you have some risk. I would stash him on my roster and hold him. If you're in a PPR league, I think he's going to be great for you. I think Adam Gase will be very aggressive in throwing the ball to Jamison Crowder. I think Darnold will be able to get him the ball. I think this Jets team isn't as bad. Everybody's forgetting that Darnold has been out out, and they've been starting their third string running or quarterback. Look, I think the Jets will play a little bit tougher than we're accustomed to him seeing. And by the way, Le'Veon Bell owners, with Darnold back, he's going to get better too. So congratulations there. Last one on my list is Deontay Johnson out of Pittsburgh, only owned in 20% of leagues. By the way, Crowder's owned in 62%. I try to stick it to like 50% and less, but Crowder's out there only in 62% of leagues. If he's out there in yours, he's out there in mine, snap him up. Deontay Johnson, though, I do think he continues to ascend. He impresses me. Now, Mason Rudolph, he's not a deep down-the-field thrower, but I think Deontay Johnson will be able to – he's the kind of guy that can take a bubble screen to the house. As he gets better, he's going to be able to feast off a single coverage with people rolling their coverage over to Juju Smith-Schuster. I think he can be a really good player. I like him more than I like James Washington at this point. Once again, he's only owned in 20% of the leagues. Now let's move it to tight ends. Vernon Davis, he's questionable. Once again, the Miami versus Washington game. He's questionable, owned in 14% of the leagues. Assuming he plays, regardless, I think Callahan will involve him in the passing game, and I think he's a touchdown candidate this week. If you're looking for a waiver plug-in, you like the touchdowns, right? And I think Vernon Davis gives you a really good shot. The best shot to get a touchdown this week, in my opinion, off the waiver wire is Seals Jones for Cleveland. Cleveland is playing Seattle this week. There's not going to be a lot of opportunities for a lot of these players, in my opinion. I think Seattle is going to play very well against Cleveland. It's going to be tough sledding. Seattle tends to give up yardage to tight ends, and I think Seals Jones would be a great play there. I know they have a couple of guys they're rotating in, but I think Seals Jones is the mismatch in that scheme. Who knows if Freddie Kitchens can get him the freaking ball, though. Last one for me for a weekly play is Gerald Everett. We saw what he did against Seattle on Thursday night. I'm not somebody who buys into the Todd Gurley is shot stuff, but I do think that this team, this offensive line is a little bit weaker. I do think McVay is going away from Todd Gurley earlier than he has since he's been there in his tenure, and the benefactor of that is going to be Gerald Everett. McVay's going to the tight ends more schematically, and I do think against San Francisco he will have some opportunities. That San Francisco pass rush is good. They're going to have to get rid of the ball quick. One of the ways to do that, once again, is to go through your tight end. So Everett, I don't love him analytically, but I think he is a one to move forward with, and that actually takes me to my annual, my long-term plays. Everett, you got to get him on your roster, especially after seeing what he did last week. I think he's somebody you got to start paying attention to. If you're looking for a long-term flyer on a tight end, he's one. Witten is another one, only owned in 52% of leagues. By the way, Everett is only owned in 4% of the leagues, so he's there for you. Witten's owned in 52% of the leagues. I still think Dak Prescott, I know they've lost 2 games in a row. I'm not down on the Cowboys. They just had 2 tough matchups against Green Bay and New Orleans. And I actually called both of those games, but I think they'll get back. I think they're actually going to win a tougher, closer than thought of game against the Jets with Sam Darnold back. And so I think some of the NFL community is probably going to freak out again. Honestly, this Jets game, I think it's going to be close. I could be wrong, but if I were a betting man, and I am, I would bet on the Jets. Now, I'm not actually going to put my money down onto them, but I did pick them in the Get Paid podcast this week. Jason Witten will get red zone targets. He continues to get red zone targets. Dak Prescott likes him and trusts him down there, and I think they'll get back to him. Last one on my list is TJ Hawkinson, playing a tough Green Bay team on Monday Night Football. Only owned in 59% of the leagues. He's scored in 2 of his 4 games so far. Stafford likes throwing to him. In the games he didn't score on, he had a lot of opportunities and had some red zone targets in those games. 59% of the leagues is too low for Hawkinson. Snap him up. A long-term play. I think he'll be one of the better tight ends in the league by the end of the season. So there you go. I'm sorry. Let me talk about the weekly stream players for defense. 49ers only owned in 36% of the leagues. I like the 49ers matchup this week against the Rams just because I think that I think the Rams will score points, but I think the 49ers will force some turnovers and get some sacks. So I like those, what I would call, I guess, bonus points. It's not always about the team that holds the team to the lowest point value. It's about the team that can get those sacks and interceptions in most formats. Next team on my list is the Steelers. I think they'll get back and have a nice game. Let me figure out who they're playing. The Chargers. Okay, let me get back to that. So the Chargers, sorry, I didn't put them in my list. I put them in my write-down list here. The Steelers, I think that they are going to, with the Chargers, be able to sack and get to Phillip Rivers. I do think they'll be able to generate some turnovers. That's going to be an interesting game to watch, but again, I think that this game will be a little bit lower scoring. I'm kind of on the under there in the point value game, but more likely than not, and Pittsburgh's a top 10 defense, by the way, they're forcing turnovers, and they were forcing turnovers last year, and they always sack the quarterback. You got to pay attention to that. Pick them up. Long-term play. It's a great one. and short-term play as well this week. Lastly, I have the Panthers. The Panthers this week are playing the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think they're going to give up points, but once again, I think they're going to be able to get to Jameis Winston. I think they'll be able to sack him. We all know Jameis Winston's a little bit erratic with the football at times, although he had a nice he took care of the ball against New Orleans last week, but I think he'll turn the ball over. I think Carolina will generate some turnovers, possibly even score this week. We saw a scoop and score against Jacksonville last week on a fumble return. I like Carolina, once again, possible touchdown candidate, but turnovers and sacks there. I think Tampa Bay is going to score, maybe in the high 20s, so you're not going to get a lot of point bonus there. You might even get some point negative, but I think they'll make up for it with other factors there. So there you go. There's a week. This time, there's a week of the waiver wire pickups, guys who to target in the week 6 of fantasy football and long term. We'll be back with another episode next week. Also, make sure to check out our video that hits later in the week. I have touchdown predictions with my analytics. It's a bigger version of this show, basically, but I have a ton of guys. So if you like to play daily fantasy and you're not sold on any of the guys I just mentioned here, I do have touchdown predictions. And if you have a deep bench, you have a deep flex, I really hit those flex matchups for you as well. Analytics are doing really well. Check up, once again, you can follow me on Twitter if you want access to the full week of analytics and score predictions. I'm at TFS_Sean on Twitter. That's SEAN. You can give me an email at functionalsportsaholic@gmail.com. You can go to my website, www.functionalsportsaholic.com. Also, please, on YouTube, like our channel. It's it's youtube.com/The Underdog if you're listening to this on the podcast. If you're watching us on YouTube already, download the podcast. They're a little bit different. We have different content. There's a lot of content to get through weekly. I don't put everything up everywhere, so a lot of stuff's going to the YouTube, though, so check that channel out. Subscribe to the channel. Watch some more videos so we can become that YouTube partner and be even more interactive, and we will catch you on another episode soon. Thanks, everyone.